¿Alguna vez has oído hablar sobre la isla de basura del Pacífico o la isla de plástico? Si nunca has escuchado algo similar o si te gustaría saber más sobre este fenómeno, te doy la bienvenida a este nuevo vídeo. Este vídeo forma parte de una serie de vídeos destinados a informar acerca de fenómenos de las ciencias naturales. Por ahora, con la atención puesta en el cambio climático y los factores que contribuyen al mismo. Pero además, sabes que en nuestro canal de IEI High School también puedes encontrar vídeos de lecciones sobre temas variados como emprendimiento, razonamiento verbal, liderazgo e incluso física. Te animo a que le eches un vistazo a nuestro canal y sigas tu aprendizaje con nuestros vídeos. Tanto si eres nuevo en nuestro canal como si no es la primera vez que nos ves, te invito a seguir viendo este vídeo en el que trataremos el tema de la gran isla de basura del Pacífico. Estudiaremos el fenómeno indicando qué materiales forman parte de esta isla de basura y los efectos que tienen sobre la vida marina. Welcome to our new video. Today we will talk about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, as well as the different materials that can be found floating in it and the impact and consequences that this patch is already having on marine life. We will answer 3 questions. Question number 1. What is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Question number 2. What are the materials that are part of these patches? And question number 3. What are the consequences of these patches on humans and animals? So let's begin our presentation by answering question number 1. What is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? In our last video, we talked about pollution. We described how contaminants, substances that are where they are not supposed to be, become pollutants when they make the surface or environment they're in hazardous with adverse biological effects. It is the case of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Although the name of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch might lead people to think that there is one single patch of litter in the shape of an island, this is actually not the case. The term Great Pacific Garbage Patch is used to refer to the collection of litter and debris, mostly made out of plastic, sometimes even invisible to the eye, that can be found in several regions of the North Pacific. There are actually 5 plastic accumulation zones in our oceans. 1 in the South Pacific, 1 in the North Atlantic and 1 in the South Atlantic, 1 in the Indian, and the largest one, which is the North Pacific Garbage Patch. Even within this plastic accumulation zone, called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, there are different regions. The Western Garbage Patch, close to the coast of Japan, the Subtropical Convergence Zone in the north, and the Eastern Garbage Patch between Hawaii and the coast of California. As said before, they are not shaped like an island. They are patches that float and that vary in size and location because of the wind and wave actions of the ocean. However, it is estimated that this Great Pacific Garbage Patch can reach an approximate size of 1.6 million square kilometers. Question number 2. What are the materials that are part of this patch? We have to consider that the reason why garbage patches are formed is because the materials that form them are not biodegradable, which means that they do not degrade easily. They just simply break down into smaller pieces. For example, any organic material such as plants, animals, fruits, etc. is biodegradable. This is that they will decompose. But non-biodegradable materials are chemicals, plastic, rubber, that do not decompose like organic materials do. These garbage patches then are made out of non-biodegradable materials. However, there is this misconception that these patches are composed of large materials such as fishing gear, water bottles, and others that can be easily seen, when in reality, microplastics tend to be the primary element in them. The composition of these patches, then, is a mix of large debris and microplastics. The reason why these patches are mostly made out of plastics is because of the large use of plastics by consumers and industries. They are cheap and durable. The problem with plastic use is that it is everywhere. Because it is durable, plastic might be used in pieces and equipment from industries during years and even decades. However, plastic can also be found in other objects with a single use or to be used during short periods of time. For example, plastic bags from the supermarket, toothbrushes, coffee and plastic cups, or straws. In addition, as we said earlier, plastics are non-biodegradable, which means that they do not decompose but go through a process called photodegradation, where the sun breaks them into smaller pieces, which is the reason why they're called microplastics, because they do not entirely degrade or decompose, they just vary in size. And whereas larger pieces of plastics can be removed more easily, microplastics can be invisible to the naked eye, which makes the removal more difficult. Likewise, this photodegradation process is very slow, and it depends on quantity, size, and type of plastic, but some of these objects might need up to 500 years to decompose. For example, toothbrushes or coffee pots. An additional misconception is thinking that all debris composing these patches can be found on the surface, when in fact scientists have discovered that approximately 70% of the debris sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. So the visible part of these patches are not but the tip of the iceberg. Denser debris can sink beneath the surface, and microplastics have also been found on the ocean floor. This is why it is practically impossible to measure the size of these patches, also considering the movements from waves and winds. The presence of this marine debris in the oceans already has extreme consequences for marine life, stability of the oceans, and eventually human life too. So let's continue our presentation by answering question number 3. What are the consequences derived from these patches? The presence of large pieces of plastic in the ocean is very dangerous. Once they reach the oceans, and if they are not removed, they will likely spend years, decades, and even centuries to decompose, not completely disappear, into smaller pieces that are more difficult and less likely to be removed, but still extremely dangerous. Animals, for example, such as turtles, might mistake certain plastic objects as jellyfish and swallow them, whereas some others, like birds, might feed plastic objects caught in the ocean to their chicks, leading to starvation and killing them, because it makes them feel full and prevents them from eating real food. But plastic can also hurt their internal organs. It is uncommon nowadays to hear news about beached whales that have plastics found in their stomachs. Ghost fishing. As we said earlier, part of the materials found in these patches belong to fishing gear. This fishing gear keeps sailing the seas, trapping animals such as turtles, seals, and other mammals in their way, drowning them, which is known as ghost fishing. Non-native species. Materials such as fishing gear and other large plastic elements might trap animals and transport them from one place to another and new environments, where they might not fit, or on the other hand, where they might be an invasive species in the new environment, which leads to the disruption of the ecosystems. Marine food. Plastic and other materials found on the surface of these patches might block sunlight from reaching organisms such as plankton and algae, which produce their own nutrients from sunlight. If this happens, the entire food chain is at risk, because animals that feed on plankton and algae, like fish and turtles, will no longer be able to do so. which will consequently lead to the decreasing number of these animals, which, at the same time, are the food source for bigger animals and predators, like sharks or whales. Absorption and release of pollutants. Plastics can absorb harmful substances and release them to the environment, where they are decomposing. These harmful substances can enter the food chain when consumed by marine life and later by humans. Economic impact, from the impact on tourism to the attempts of cleaning these patches. En esta presentación hemos visto The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, los diferentes materiales que los componen, así como la consecuencia que tienen sobre la vida marina y eventualmente sobre la vida humana también. It's time now to practice what we have just learned. For today's lesson, the activity is quite simple. Watch the following 4-minute video in YouTube and later write down your thoughts about what you just watched and link them to what you learned during our presentation. Muchísimas gracias por vernos y hasta luego.